Good evening, good evening, good evening. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Lee Smith, and I'm the current Vice Polemarch of the Brooklyn, Long Island Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity, Incorporated. As part of our community service efforts, the Brooklyn, Long Island Alumni Chapter regularly hosts community events to educate our constituents on issues that affect us all. COVID-19 has, of course, relegated a lot of our efforts to virtual spaces. But the need to continue our education efforts around these issues is now more important than ever. For Black History Month, we wanted to include weekly virtual programming that will allow our constituents the opportunity to hear from experts from various professions from the comfort and safety of your homes. Tonight, we kick off the month with our guest, Robert Johnson from Chicago, with Let's Talk Finances, a convo on investment and wealth management. Next Thursday, February 10th, we'll have Navigating COVID-19, the variants and the vaccine. On February 17th, we'll have our Voters Town Hall with Brooklyn Councilman Chi Osei. And on February 24th, we've amassed a wealth of mental health experts for your mental health and COVID. So thank you for tuning in tonight. Be sure to join us every Thursday this month from 7 to 8:30 p.m. here on Facebook Live as we bring you this slate of informative programming. I now turn it over to our moderator of the evening, Brother Kevin Boston Hill. Enjoy.
Thank you, Brother Smith, and welcome everyone to Let's Talk Finances, a program that is brought to you by the Brooklyn, Long Island Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity, Incorporated. We bring you this is just another session in the long series of our community service projects and webinars that we bring to you, the general public, to make sure that you get the information that you need. Today, as you heard, we are fortunate enough to have with us to give us the benefit of his expertise, Mr. Robert Johnson III, Certified Financial Planner. He's the founder and managing partner of Optimal Planning Partners. As a certified financial planner, Robert's practice focuses on both wealth management and comprehensive financial planning for individuals and for several school districts, municipalities, and nonprofit organizations in Chicago and the surrounding suburbs. He actually obtained his Bachelor of Business Administration degree from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and also has a Master of Business Administration from the University of Illinois at Chicago. And of course, to show how great that he is and to show all of his credentials, he is actually an award-winning certified financial planner, having awards from Investment News Magazine as a top 40 under 40 advisor, Chicago Magazine 5-star wealth manager, the $1 Million Roundtable qualifying member, among a host of other awards as well to show his expertise. So you are in for a treat this evening. So I want you all to sit back, take some notes, take copious notes, and please feel free to send in your questions that you may have that Brother Johnson will be able to answer for you as well. So with that said, I'd like to turn things over to Brother Robert Johnson III, who will be able to answer any and all questions that you have regarding your finances. But before we do, I do want to make note, because a lot of you may be here looking for our second panelist that we've been advertising, and for Miss Anka Monroe. She did have a family emergency that she had to attend to, so she will not be able to join us here this evening. But of course, our thoughts and prayers go out to her and her family to make sure that they are able to get through this difficult time that they have now. But without any further ado, I'd like to turn things over to Brother Johnson. Please, sir, take it away.
All right, well, thank you, brothers, for the warm introduction. And I'm very pleased and happy to be part of this very great thing you're all doing for Black History Month. And like Kevin mentioned, I'm in Chicago, so I'm understanding that we're getting some of the weather there that we just got this past couple of days here. So hopefully everyone's safe and hunkered away from all the snow that we've been receiving here. But let me go ahead and put the presentation up so everyone can take a look at what we're talking about today. And I am, again, very pleased to be able to provide information because I understand that everyone comes from different backgrounds. And really, talking about money is something that never really goes away. It's something we talk about on a regular basis. And in my 18 years in this business, there's never been a time, no matter what the situation, COVID or any kind of economic situations, where it does not come into play. So I'm definitely happy here to speak with you more about that and kind of dive into it here. The title of the presentation is about financial strategies 101. And that really is more about, getting back to the basics. Because when we look at the overall structure of money and planning and investing, it starts with doing some of the more basic things that are out there. And then today, what we'll be covering will be a number of different items. You talk about what's smart, smart financial management. What are the advantages of that? We talked about COVID, and that's one of the obstacles. That's one of the things that we're dealing with right now and have been for up to almost 2 years now. And how do you deal with those situations while on your path to financial success? And also we'll dive into some more of the specifics, cash management. How do you deal with the day-to-day and dealing with the funds that you have and make the best use of those? The risk management, which are the insurances, the estate planning, which we're talking about, providing a legacy, because we all live here and live day-to-day, but we want to make sure that the world we leave behind, not just for others, but also for our family, is a better one than we started with. Diving into investment strategies, the market, things of that nature, taxes, that's always one that's a good talking point this time of year as we approach the tax deadline. And then more importantly, retirement. That's a big one. I'll save it for last because of the fact that, although many of us are working every day and enjoying what we do, there will be a time that we want to step aside and, kind of check into our second chapter of our lives here. But jumping into COVID, I definitely wanted to make sure we touched on that because, it's one thing that we've been impacted by that it's unreal. I mean, we talk about what's been going on in all industries across the board. In this business that I'm in, I've seen the extremes on both sides of that, from the restaurant workers, the business owners who have gone through such a devastating time in their lives where, businesses where they've been in for 30, 40 years were shut down overnight. I've seen restaurant workers who rely upon the ins and outs of restaurants and dining, travel industry have just changed what they do on a daily basis. And it really goes back to the basics, and in this whole COVID situation that we're dealing with is really testing our foundation and the things that we have maybe got away from us over the years. So we'll definitely want to touch on some of that because when we look at it, those that were impacted on the negative side of COVID, it's all about income, and talk about income, that's the driving force of what's going to make our lives allow us to do the things that we need to do. So when we talk about financial management, it starts with our first paycheck. And that doesn't just mean that you have to be a 9-to-5 worker. You could be a landlord who collects rent and lives off of that. It could be, you could be consultants where you work for various companies and they're paying you to do the things that they need necessary to be done. So when we talk about that, the first paycheck is important because with that gives you the power to do all the things that you need to do from a financial standpoint. And COVID tested that because one of the first things I tell anyone when they first start a job or transition to a new career is that, it's great. You're making a great income. You're doing, what you want to do and being fairly compensated for it. But the other side of it is, it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep. And that gets overlooked far too often because of the fact that we look at, the dollar sign, we see the things we can buy with it. But at the end of the day, if you're making $100,000 and you're spending $105,000, you're really not making any money. So we really want to talk about how to really handle your paychecks and really make a good path for yourself as you're moving forward. And the way we do that, we make a plan. Kevin mentioned I'm a certified financial planner. And it's a title, but at the same time, it's all about making a plan because when we look at planning for the future, imagine trying to drive across the country. And these days, not having a GPS, you don't have a destination, or you have your destination, but you don't have a means of getting there. So with the financial plan, it works the same way. We want to make sure that if you have a place, a destination you want to go to, let's make a map of it. Let's figure out how to get there. What stops do we have to make along the way and check in to ensure that you will be well on your way to getting there as efficiently as possible. So the plan is really the key, making sure that we know exactly where we're going and how we're getting there. And the advantage of it keeps you focused. It keeps your eye on the prize and keeps you going, because if you haven't achieved the destination that you're going to, it's going to keep pushing you to keep going there and going there. Far too often, I meet clients, and before they become clients, having general conversations, they would say, "Hey, I make good money. I want to do this and that. However, I don't know how to get there." And that's what we do. They need some focus, some organization, a track to run on. And then once we have that, we can coordinate your goals and get you to where you need to be. But again, yeah, and the one point I would say to take away from this is that it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. And we really want to focus on that as we continue to build a financial foundation and beyond. Now, we all know, there's some obstacles along the way, and this gets back to COVID as well. We talk about everyone wants to have this $1 million retirement, multi-million-dollar retirement, but there's things that happen along the way. It's life that will happen. If you're a business owner, yeah, you may have some troubles or difficulties going through that. But the biggest obstacle is not having a goal. If you don't know where you want to go, it's hard to figure out why you're doing what you're doing. Another big piece of that is debt. We all have been subject to debt at some point in time, because if you own a home, you have credit cards, student loans, any types of things that you don't have the savings to properly take care of, debt is one thing that can slow you down. And we're going to talk about that too, because the debt is really what weighs a lot of people down. And if we can get from under that, you can see a drastic increase on how you're living and how you're handling your situation for you. One thing also, in addition to that, has been, not really a big issue over the years, but it's inflation. I can remember as a child going to get some milk for my mother, riding my bike, going to get some milk. It was like $1.10. Now, a gallon of milk, it's $5. So it's not because, the cows are costing more to live. It's the cost of just the rising prices that are out there. And that's one thing we have to take into consideration with financial planning. Your dollar today in 2022, say you retire in 20 years, is not going to stretch as far. So we have to have some other ways to get around that to ensure that we're on the right path, because we don't want to get to a place where our money is worth less than what we need to use it for. And the biggest one, I could talk to this all day, but procrastination. We all have great ideas, great visions of things we want to do, but far too often we say, "Hey, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week. Oh, I'll start that at the beginning of the year for my New Year's resolution." So procrastination is a delay, and it does have a huge impact on how well you can finish up your financial situation for you. So those are some of the obstacles that we come across, and it's tough to really identify which one is the most dynamic and impactful for us. But many of us fall into the boat where all four may come into play. But if you have any of these obstacles, there are ways to get around that, and there's ways we can talk about that as well. So one of the biggest parts of debt is we call it painless plastic, and it's just credit card, because of the fact that it's so easy. In a state of COVID, we're all home. We're all doing things just like this, having conversations on the computer, shopping online, Amazon. I mean, it's really easy to spend money now with the click of a button. Even to the point where you can have your credit card saved in there and just hit the button every time you want to buy something. I'm guilty of it, do it often. But you have to be in a position to understand that what you're spending is not more than what you're bringing in. So once you get some of that in order, it helps to really identify how to reduce your overall debt and also increase your cash flow on a regular basis. Here's an example, talking about credit card debt. Now, it's amazing when you look at credit card debt these days, where right now the interest rates in the world are very low. We're at all-time lows. People are buying houses at 2.5%. There's a lot of great opportunities to build wealth through property and whatnot. But for some reason, these credit card interest rates, they're not changing. They're still, it just shows 12%, but I've seen clients' credit card statements 15, 18%. But in this example here, a $3,000 credit card payment or credit card balance, if you pay just $50 a month, it would take you almost 8 years to pay it off. And over that time, there'll be about $1,500 of actual interest that has accrued over that time. So think about that. You know, if you have the ability to pay that $3,000 without any kind of interest, paying it out of your savings account or any kind of investment that you have to get away from that, you're saving a lot of money, and that money could be reinvested and do something else that could benefit your family or yourself or whoever you're looking to benefit. But yeah, credit cards are significant, but that's one thing we definitely want to make sure we focus on and eliminating some of that, because it does hurt us in the long haul. The biggest way to do it, just stop using it. Stop charging. You know, if that's the first step, because once you stop charging, you know exactly the highest amount of debt that you're going to have. And then paying it off, you find the one with the highest annual rate of interest and aggressively pay that down. Now, mind you, some of the things we're talking about today may be very, very basic, very much of a review for some people out there. But keep in mind that that's what we want to talk about, because too far often we get focused on buying a lot of the different things out there, and we just kind of reel it back in and get back to some of the basics. So part of that is paying the credit card debt off as quick as possible. You know, if you want to get it down and not have to pay the additional interest, pay more than the minimum. If you can put, you know, some of your extra savings or maybe change some of your habits to realize that you can put more towards that, you should do that. If your credit is in a position where you can negotiate or find some cards that have some properties that allow you to reduce the interest rate or have 0% for a period of time, that's a great way of going about it. And you have to be just diligent in making those payments. But most importantly, it's about having that budget. And I'd be very pressed to see, you know, everyone who's on this call or anyone across the board that doesn't have a budget, you know, and it's okay. It's okay not to have a budget. And that's why we're here today, to make sure we can identify that's where we want to start. We should all have a clear idea of how much comes into the household every single month. If you work a 9-to-5 job, you have a paycheck twice a month or every 2 weeks, you know how much is going to come in. So knowing that helps you predict and give you the opportunity to figure out what's coming in and how much am I really spending. In doing that, that's going to put greater focus on where your dollars are going and find a better way to get rid of some of that debt for you. Now, we talked about inflation, and this is a great example of inflation. I gave an example about, you know, buying milk and, you know, $1.50 now turned to $5. This shows historically what has happened. So 1913, I mean, it goes back a long way. That's a great year. That's my chapter's anniversary, 1913, down in Champaign. But that $1 back in 1913, think about how the impact of that goes over the years. You know, we'll go fast forward to 2019. That $1 is worth $25, almost $26. So we're talking about, yeah, it's over 100 years. But even we talk about going 30 years, 35 years. From 1913 to 1950, the dollar more than doubled. So when we look at that, you know, we want to make sure that if we're planning for the future, we take that into account, because far too often we'll have some investors who may, you know, who want to get in the market but are very nervous. They don't want to take the risk that's out there. But at the end of the day, if you're not keeping up with the rate of inflation and what's happening, your dollar is not really making money. In some situations, you could be losing money because you have the ability to buy less than what you did several years ago. And speaking of inflation, just as more of a present term, if anyone's been listening to the news and hearing about that, you know, inflation's on the rise. So these numbers that we see are based on historic numbers. Right now, we're looking at inflation that's creeping towards 6%. That's some of the predictions that we're seeing, and that's significant. Historically, we're looking at 3%, 2.5%. And all that means is that, you know, your dollar is dwindling that much quicker as far as the purchasing power that you have there. So when investing and looking at that, we want to make sure any kind of portfolios you have, may it be for your 401k plan or an IRA that you have, or just general investment, they are in the market. You know, you have to take a little bit of risk to get a little bit more return. And this right here is a good example of why you need to do that. Procrastination. Yeah, that's always a fun one, because we've had people, I've met with clients. Kevin mentioned that, you know, I do some work with school systems. And early in my career, you know, I was working with teachers, you know, first-year teachers, you know, first, second-year teachers. And, you know, the whole goal is that, hey, just get started, get something going, because you're going to need it down the road. You know, you may be 22 years old, but there's a need for it. But this example here shows that, you know, someone who's 25 years old they have 40 years into retirement. So if you look at the end value of $500,000 for a 25-year-old, to get there, they go $189 a month and they'll get to 500,000. But that same person who's 25 and says, hey, you know what, I want to travel, I want to enjoy life before I start saving, say they're 40. Now that same person who's now 40 years old has to spend or save about $614 a month just to get to the same point as that 25-year-old. That is significant. And the thing that many people fail to realize, there will always be something going on. If you graduate from college, you start working. Maybe at some point you get married, then you have children, then you have daycare, and then you have college. You have all those things that come up. There will always be something that's going to get your attention and try to pull you away from doing some of the foundational things. But you have to hold strong. And that's why when you get those paychecks, you start with the basics and say, hey, no matter what, I'm going to pay myself first because I worked hard during this 40 hours or 60 hours, depending on what your career entails. And if you're paying yourself first, that's going to put you in a place where it's already automatic. You're not even thinking about it. And by the time you are 40, you have a significant amount saved up, and it gives you some flexibility to do other things that you may be needing to do or wanting to do. So, how do we get started? You have to assess your current situation. Take an honest look, and that's probably the hardest part about it because we get so caught up in the day-to-day. Really looking at what we have going on. It's tough. It's one of those things where no one likes to see a bad situation, but we'll watch a car crash on the highway and just stare at it, and that brings up traffic. Sometimes that car crash is right in your house. You have to take a look at your finances, take a look at your budget, take a look at what your insurances are looking like, your investments, all the things to see what's happening. Because once you've assessed it and identified it, then you can pivot from there and do something different. But if you don't know where you are, it's going to be very difficult to figure out where you're trying to go. So these are some of the areas, and I know it's a lot, but it's a lot of different areas that you can cover. If you don't feel like you're in a position to look at some of these areas, I say again, go back to the budget, go back to the cash management, because that's where it starts. Now, goal setting, it's a good thing. And it's again, this time of year is a good time. We just finished up January, one of the biggest months where goals are being set, New Year's resolutions, all the things we're going to do in 2022 that we haven't done in the previous years. My stance on goal setting is that it's great to have goals. Great. I'm a firm believer in having goals. The flip side of that is, one, you can't have 35 goals. You can't do that, because how do you manage 35 goals? You really want to hone in on some of the different areas. The short-term goals, things that may be something that has to happen within the next 30 days, 45 days. You have your longer-term goals, which may be preparing for your children's education, preparing for retirement. And then you also have some of the ongoing goals, like some of the debt items we talked about, transferring debt to lower costs or lower interest rate cards, figuring out a way for taxes to be lowered on your spend. But I always encourage clients, pick one goal, maybe two. But the other side of the goal is have a very detailed action plan of how you're going to do it. If you're working out and you want to get to a certain physique or lose some weight, put it on your calendar. Put a time and date you're going to actually go to the gym. Treat it like an appointment, like it's a doctor's appointment. And when you do that, you're probably more likely to do it. The same thing exists with financial goals. Get the title, but at the same time, it's all about making a little feedback coming here. I'm sorry. But yeah, with financial goals, the same way. If you're getting paid every 2 weeks, put a reminder on your calendar. I'm going to transfer X amount of dollars into this account because I'm looking to have this amount after 30 days or 45 days, or whatever the timeline is. But we definitely want to make sure that whatever we do is very intentional. Goals are easy to create. The action plans take that extra step, but that's going to help get you closer to actually reaching those goals as well. So some of the tips, let's talk about setting goals. That's going to be the good start. But I will also add to that the action items, the step-by-step actions you're going to take to do that. And when working with someone like myself or anyone that you may be working with, if they're not helping you do that, ask the question. Ask the question. Yes, I need this amount of money, but what do I need to do to get there? And how do I go about it? I'm always a fan of asking for help, because if you don't know something, someone else does. And more than likely, they're willing to help you to get there. And I can test personally, that's one of the main things I love to see is the growth of a client and seeing how they transition over the years. After 18 years in the business, and I've met people, they were 25 years old with no children, and they're living single with their parents. Now they're older, they have a lot more going on, and that progress is good, and it's a good feeling to see that. So people who work in this industry, they enjoy that. So if you're not working with somebody, please take the time to find someone that will be good for you, and will help you get there. But paying yourself first, we mentioned that too. That's going to be the first step. You don't work for your credit card, or you don't work for your mortgage company. You don't work for here in Illinois, we use Xfinity for internet and cable. You don't work for them, so why are you paying them first before you're paying yourself? And that should be a very easy first step to do, and making sure that you're putting yourself in a financial position to be successful. We didn't really touch on this, but emergency reserves are important. Now, this 8 months, that's aggressive. That's definitely a goal to reach at some point. But before you get there, I would say let's start with getting up to 3 months of emergency reserves. And what that means is not 3 months of your bills, not 3 months of your different items that you're working with every year. We want 3 months of your take-home pay, because we want to be in a position where if you're in a situation where you're in a job transition, you're leaving a job or doing some studying or doing whatever it may be that you're not going to have that income, we want to make sure that you can have something set aside that will let you do exactly what you need to do during that transition. Now, 3 months is on the lower side. 6 months, 8 months, that's good. I've had some clients who push it and say, hey, I want to do 12 months because I may want to take some time off, like a personal leave, and I want to be able to study something, become a sommelier and become a wine expert. So I want to have 12 months of my income set aside where I can still live and still have those studies and not have to worry about any kind of financial issues. But emergency reserves is very important. And this is money that you do not touch. And I repeat, do not touch. For trips, you don't touch it for paying bills. It's literally for something in a true emergency. The roof needs repair. Your car breaks down, which doesn't allow you to get to work. I guess in this day and age, your computer breaks down because you can't remote work. I mean, whatever it may be, it has to be a true emergency, and it's not going to be used as an ATM type of situation. Deducting from your paycheck is another great way. Many employers allow you the opportunity to split your direct deposit to multiple accounts, at least maybe two, sometimes even more. But that's a great way of having automatic payments going towards either credit cards or going towards a savings account. Like I mentioned, paying yourself first. What better way is it for you to put money in a savings account and not even have to physically do it? I've always shared with clients and friends, if my 401k was not taken directly out of my account, I would never have amassed the amount of money out of my 401k because I would have to physically give it to them. The fact that they're taking it out of my account and I don't look at it, I don't feel it, it makes it that much easier, and you take the whole human element out. So these automatic deductions out of your checks, out of your savings accounts, all those things are just quick tips to help you get ahead. And it's important. The same thing goes for the company retirement plan. 401k, you can adjust that and make adjustments as you need for that. But that's going to be a way of paying yourself first again. And you see, I'm saying it over and over again because I really want to make sure it's driving home, because that's the difference, because far too often we're just not doing it, especially in an era where we're very consumer driven. We're on Instagram, we see all the ads, we see how people are living, and we want to live the same lifestyle. But I'd be hard pressed to say that the people that are doing that, they've got some other money set aside, but they might not be exposing or presenting that side of things for you. So risk management. So I take a step back here and get away. Risk management is something that is very, very important. I mean, we look at a full financial plan. It's the cornerstone. It's the one part of your financial plan that it rests on everything. We think about it in many different ways. Everyone who has a car, I know in Illinois and Chicago here, if you have a car, you have to have some form of insurance on it, some liability insurance. We have health insurance in case you get sick. You want to make sure that you can be taken well taken care of without having those massive health insurance bills or health medical bills. But a lot of times we overlook some of the ones that take care of us as individuals in our family. So we talked about, everything starts with a paycheck. So what would happen if the paycheck that you receive twice a month, once a month, or whatever it may be, just came to a halting stop? If it stopped, how would you move forward? And it goes back to us talking about the emergency reserves. If you have the emergency reserves, 3 months, 6 months, that will help carry you on during that timeline to be able to get back on your feet. But what if you become disabled? Something as basic as, you fall off a ladder in the house and you're partially disabled for 6, 8 months, 10 months. What do you have in play that's going to make sure that your family has the opportunity to still live the lifestyle that you have been going all these years? So many people overlook disability. It's important. Most companies will have a disability policy for you, which is good. So they say that in case you can't work, you're entitled to up to 60% of your income. That's great. But if you're a self-employed person, you may not have those types of opportunities. So when we look at the cornerstone, it's the what if. What if I cannot work? What if I am unable to take care of myself? And that's when long-term care comes into play. What if I'm not here? How does my family, my children, my spouse, how do they move forward without my income coming forward? So we want to make sure that when we're talking about planning for the future, we have to have that conversation. And it's kind of a situation as a financial planner, it's almost considered malpractice if we don't talk about it. Because if we're talking about building wealth and strategies and all that, but we're not talking about the what ifs, we're really doing a disservice to our clients, because that's a very important part of what we do every day. So the single most valuable asset. I've done these conversations. I wish we were in person, because I'd ask the question, what's the most valuable asset that you have? And many times I'll hear the answer, oh, it's my house. It's my car, it's my house. And that's so very far from the truth, because of the fact that, those are liabilities. Those are liabilities. They cost you money to maintain a car. It costs you money to maintain a house. And your single most valuable asset, go back to the basics again. It's your ability to earn an income. That drives everything else going forward. So we want to make sure that that income is protected. It's protected not just for yourself, but also for your family. So we went over some of this already, talking about the disability. But when looking at people today, and this is a great stat, 1 of 4 people 20 years old become disabled before age 67. That's 1 in 4. Now as far as mortality and all that, yeah, there's a much 1 in 20 number, 1 in 25 type of number. But from a disability standpoint, you look at your 3 best friends, maybe one of you will be disabled at some point before age 67. What do you have in play that's going to put you in a position where you can still move forward, no matter what your physical state is? A big one that's been coming up recently, it's the long-term care side of things. Our community, we've never been one to be very big on long-term care. A lot of people, I'll say with my kids, I have family take care of me. They'll do the things necessary to keep me going and take care of the activities I'm unable to do. But what long-term care is, it's the ability to take care of yourself. And I call them the activities of daily living. And they're basic things such as feeding yourself, taking yourself to the bathroom, being able to take yourself out of the bed every morning, cleaning your home. If you're unable to do 2 of those things, the doctors will actually say you are considered disabled. You're unable to do that, and you'd be eligible to take effect for some long-term care plan, maybe through your local government, through federal government, or even any kind of plans that you may have in play. But as our population is aging, I can speak towards that, because I've seen people every day living much longer than we used to. Back in the 30s and 40s, and if you made it to age 65, you are probably the oldest person in the room. These days, I have clients, I have people I know are in their 90s, pushing 100. So, as you get older, unfortunately, you typically don't get healthier. So if that's the case, you want to have a situation in which you can have some care. And I say this a lot, not just to people who are already up in age, but people who are here now. People say they're in their 40s and have parents in their 60s. If there's nothing set up and established to be able to take care of your parents at some point in time, guess who's going to have to put the bill for that? It's going to be the children. So we have conversations with children to make sure they're prepared going into that, because it's one of those situations that once you're there, there's no turning back. You have to figure out how it's going to happen. So the planning and the preparations is really needed. And nursing homes across the country aren't very inexpensive. They're very expensive. So there's plans available to allow you the ability to do that. But those are some of the things that we talk about from a risk management standpoint. It's not always the most fun conversation, but it's one of those types of conversations we want to have, at least one time to bring it out. Because my goal is to make sure you have the information and see what's out there, but also take steps in order to prepare for it. And lastly, the life insurance side, that's a big piece. Life insurance does so many different things. A lot of people look at it as death insurance, just to do final burial, maybe some health expenses. But the impact of someone who dies prematurely has been unreal. I mean, especially during the last 2 years with COVID. I mean, we're seeing people who are gone far too long, far too early, with in their 30s and their 40s, leaving families behind with young children. So having that type of conversation, saying, hey, if I don't come home from work today, there's a plan set up that's going to help generate that same income to the household for the next 20 years until our kids are out of our dependency and onto their own independence. So those are things to think about as we're preparing and creating a financial plan. Estate planning is a little different, and that's more so making sure that when that transition happens for people who are no longer with us, making sure, again, it's not a burden for the next generation. We may have seen many situations where people pass away, and unfortunately, we've seen family members come out of the woodworks to, oh yeah, I was promised this jewelry, I was promised this land, I was promised a variety of things that no one ever heard of. And what happens then? It goes to court. If there's no plan set up, there's no estate plan established, it goes to the court system because there is no way to determine that. So part of our conversations are like, hey, if you have valuables, if you have anything, you already have an estate. Now it's your job and our job to work with you to manage that estate so that in that transition, it's smooth. Because we can all talk about, if someone passes away, it's hard enough as it is already. Now you put on top of that the financial items that go along with that, it just makes it more of a stressful situation. But yeah, if you do not have a financial plan, my father always says, if you don't have a financial plan, the state of Illinois has one for you, and they'll dictate it based on what they want to do. And the same applies in New York. And actually, New York's a little more stricter in how they do it. So I would definitely encourage anyone in the New York area who has not looked at creating their financial plan for their estate, definitely get with somebody to be able to do that, because it'll make your life easier and also those of your loved ones. Now let's get back to talking about some more fun things, investment. We talked about insurances and disability and all those. Let's talk about how we create financial wealth, investment strategies, long-term, short-term, and developing the goals and the programs to be able to do so. A lot of postponing comes in and procrastination, and you see some of the examples here. I've got a baby on the way. There are other needs, besides saving for retirement, saving for my emergency fund. I have kids going to college. I just can't afford it. All the different things are there. It even happens as you have the kids out of the house. We're empty nesters. We want to travel. Well, yeah, you want to travel, but you want to make sure that you're traveling with money you have established versus money that's on credit cards, like we talked about. So there's a lot of reasons people don't do what they need to do, but we don't want to be caught in that. We don't want to be caught in that situation because it doesn't promote any kind of growth over the years for you. Now, part of investment management, and this has been really important during the last probably 30 days or so, because we've seen a volatile market. There's been a lot going on, and I won't dig into why it's happening, but there's a couple things happening outside of COVID with overseas issues going on that really have exposed a lot of us to how much risk we're comfortable with. I sit down with people all the time and have conversations about, hey, well, how much risk do you want to make? Or how much risk do you have? Well, I just want to make a lot of money. Okay, so you're a risk taker. Oh yeah, I'm a risk taker. Well, that gets exposed when the market goes down, because some of those risk takers that want to make all the money, they're the first ones I get a call from when the market goes down. And one thing about taking risk is that in order to have the high returns and make the most on your investment, you're not going to have good days every single day. You're not going to have good months every single month. You're not going to have good years every single year. However, as history shows, you'll be ahead in the long haul, but you have to sustain those ups and downs. So part of what we do when looking at planning for investments and doing different things is have a risk tolerance questionnaire. We sit down, typically it's 6 to 8 questions about different scenarios. If this were to happen, how would you respond? If the market were to tumble 20% in 30 days or a year, how would you feel about that? What would you do? So those types of conversations are had prior to we start even picking investments, because that's going to tell us which area investor that you are. If you're moderate, kind of middle of the road, if you're more conservative or risk averse, as you see here, or if you're a risk taker and you're super aggressive. But that really dictates where you want to go. I'll tell you that from a retirement planning standpoint, if you have more than 10, call it 15 years, that's a long time in the market. So you can be a little bit more tolerant for risk, because if your goal is to make some good, solid returns on your investment, you're going to have to take that risk. And 10 to 15 years is still a good amount of time. Now, if you're getting within that 5-year time zone, 3 years, and this is really the only pool of funds that you're working with that you have to use in retirement, yeah, we'll reassess that. But no, anyone who has 20 plus years in the market should be in a position, if they're comfortable with it, to be a little bit more risk tolerant. And it depends on who you are and what your background and maybe some of the prior experiences you might have had with the market. But we definitely want to position you in such a way that you're going to be more aggressive in your younger years, and then taper it down as you get closer and closer to meeting those funds. Now, this is one of my favorite pyramids, favorite charts to look at here. And it's come in handy so recently. And part of the conversation today, I know I want to talk about, and I was mentioned that we should talk about some Bitcoin. Okay, Bitcoin's been a hot topic. A lot of people want to talk about Bitcoin, and that's great. It's one of the things that you've seen a lot of people making some good returns on that. When we look at this pyramid here, it talks about the risk versus the reward. So with any home, I mean, there might be people on this forum here who have built homes before, their own homes from the ground up, and any good home starts with a solid foundation. So when you look at the foundation, let's take a look what we're looking at here. On the left side here, you see savings, 6 to 8 months net salary. Talked about that. That's your emergency savings. You want to make sure you have that. If you have a home, you want to make sure if you have that home, you have some insurance on it, because if that home goes away, the note doesn't go away. So you want to make sure you have the proper insurance in play to make sure you can take care of it in any situation. We talked about the insurances and the life insurance, disability, and whatnot. So that's another cornerstone, like we mentioned. And then we also talked about the retirement, 401ks, pensions, IRAs. Those are the areas, if you're just getting started, you really want to spend the majority of your time in. Because like any good house, without that foundation, it will fall down. I see far too often that, clients will call in. I get fed 3 emails today. So it's a good time to jump into Bitcoin. Well, let's talk about everything else you have going on. How much do you have saved in emergency savings right now? Are you contributing at least 10% to your retirement savings? Have you purchased a home yet? Or have you gone down that path to start building some equity in different ways? And that's how I start the conversation. Now, it's not a popular conversation to have when I do that, because everyone who's looking at Bitcoin typically has some big dreams in mind. And I love that. That's a great thing. But that's a high risk investment that's further up on this pyramid here. Now, if you're looking at this pyramid, the next level that we're talking about here after that foundation has been taken care of, now we're looking at fixed annuities, CDs, things that are very stable, things that are there and not taking on a whole lot of risk. And then we start jumping higher into the variable annuities, college savings plans, which are 529, large company funds, things of that nature. Now, keep in mind, some of these things, large company funds, large company investments, bonds, and all that, those are typically wrapped into your retirement account. So, those are part of that. So that's how it grows and gets the growth value there. This area is really speaking of things outside of the retirement areas. But as you progress up here, the areas that we're looking at, they get more and more risky. Individual stocks, derivatives. Those are your your options, options and securities. All the different commodities are out there. Penny stocks. That's where those come into play. Now, Bitcoin, if you were to look at the scale and see exactly where it falls, it'd be at the very, very top of the scale here. And it's for good reason, because with Bitcoin, it's an unregulated market. And quite honestly, I'd be hard pressed to find anyone who can explain how the values rise and fall. They're great. Now, back up. I have some Bitcoin. I still do not understand exactly how it rises and falls. However, it's only a small piece of the pie, because I had to make sure I was, walking the path I'm speaking, make sure that foundation is there. Now, if you've done these things, go for it. But I'd always caution you, never put too much into something as risky that you're not willing to lose. If you're willing to lose 5,000 in Bitcoin, go for it. But understand that it can fall very quickly, and it could be funds that could also rise very quickly. But if you don't have your foundation in order in some of these other areas in the lower, wider portion of the portfolio here in this pyramid, yeah, you might put yourself in a tough position. I've had clients who do not, come to me and say, "Hey, I've got these stocks. I've got great stocks. They're doing well for me, and but I have an emergency. I don't want to sell these stocks." I said, "Well, that's the advantage of having these types of savings plans for you, because if you're in a position where you have these savings and an emergency pops up, you don't have to sell your stock." Well, last year the market was doing very well. The last 11 years, the market's been doing very well. No one really wants to take money out of their portfolio and that's making 15, 20% a year to be able to use that and go pay for a roof or go pay for an alternator or something that's that's not a huge amount, but you just don't have it available to you in your emergency savings. So the key is just working within this pyramid and making sure that before you make any quick decisions on what you want to do, establishing where you are now and figuring out, does it make sense to go to that next level? Now, we all may have heard of Warren Buffett or know Warren Buffett's teachings and about the market. And I love this quote because it says, "We don't have to be smarter than the rest. We just have to be more disciplined than the rest." And that applies not just to investing, but across the board. The smartest man in the world is not the richest man in the world. But that person who may be the richest man in the world has very good discipline, had a clear plan to get to where he is. And I think Warren Buffett's not even the richest one anymore. It's Elon Musk. But he had a plan, and he's running that plan. So keep that in mind. It's not about discipline. It's not about being the most intelligent in the room. It's about having the most discipline and implementing some of those strategies that are out there. Now, we talk about diversification. We talk about managing that risk. Now, we've all heard the saying, "Don't put all your eggs in one basket." And that's applied directly towards investment. Investments come in different shapes and sizes and different types of investments. If you're looking at general asset allocations, and all that really means is the different types of investments that you have. You have your large company stocks, and those are stocks for the Googles of the world, Amazon, Home Depot, Tesla, all the places, Walmart, all the places that we probably use every single day. Amazon, I can go on for days. That's one category of investment. And typically they're the most solid of all the categories because they're well established. They have a history behind them, what they've been able to do. And they're the safer of typically any investments out there. But other categories include mid-company stocks, small company stocks, international, specialty stocks. And those specialties can be gold, that could be utilities, healthcare, technology, all different specialties that are out there. So the goal is that you don't want to just pick one and let it ride. You want to make sure that you can put money in different areas, because if you look at historically how the market operates, they all don't go up the same, they don't go down the same. But if you have money in different areas, the years in which the large company stocks weren't performing as well, if you have money in the small companies, that's going to help balance out your portfolio to make sure you're in a position of having some steady growth. No one likes a roller coaster ride, up and down, up and down. We all like steadiness for the most part, especially for things that we're counting on, for retirement, for college savings. So having that diversification is very, very important. The part that a lot of people may not understand what this means, but I want to break it down so it makes some sense. dollar cost averaging. And that's a great way of investing as the market's going through all the volatility and ups and downs. What dollar cost averaging is, it's saying that, say for instance, you're putting $100 a month into an IRA. That investment you have in your IRA in a well-diversified portfolio is going in, say, first of the month. It's buying those shares based on that date. So say it's buying, 10 shares because that's what the $100 will get you. Plus the market goes down the next month and that $100 is systematic going in the first of the month. That may get you more shares. It might get you 20 or 30 shares because the price is falling. Over time, you're automatically purchasing at different points of the time, points of the calendar, which is allowing you to actually lower your overall cost of your investment. And the goal with an investment is you buy low, you sell high. And a lot of times we reverse that. Market falls, people panic, they sell their investment. You want to do the exact opposite. But dollar cost averaging allows you to do that on a regular basis because you're systematically making purchases into the market no matter what the cost is. So 401ks, that's why I always tell people 401ks, systematic mutual fund savings, systematic Roth IRAs, whatever it may be, are going to be some of your greatest vehicles you can use because of the fact you're always making purchases in the market. And in a time like this right now where the market's down, I saw, we're on Facebook Live, Facebook was down 26% today. If you buy Facebook today, assuming it doesn't keep going down, you're going to get a lot more shares today than you would have got yesterday. But if you're looking just to purchase, on the dips and, different areas like that, you're timing the market. And timing the market is not a very successful thing unless that's your job. And that's what you do every single day. But these are some of the really important things that a lot of people don't talk about, but it's important if you really want to build that wealth over time. Now, retirement planning, it's just one of those things where, we look at what's out there. Most people think you retire at 65, you live off your generous pensions, you live off Social Security and everything is good. Well, that's really not the case. Social Security as it is today is not the Social Security of our grandparents or great-grandparents. The system was designed to be able to help you in retirement, help you do some of the things to kind of get you into a situation where you're not having to work and come off, your factory job where it's not as hard for you. Now, Social Security is at a point where, it's underfunded and not enough money in there right now. And there's a lot more people paying into it. That's why it's having some issues. So part of what we want to talk about is not relying upon those employer plans, not relying upon Social Security, because if they were to take the rug from under us and say, hey, it's gone, what do you do next? So it's all about preparation. Some of the biggest concerns we see, I see it every day, clients are most concerned with running out of money. That's a scary thought. You stop working, you've saved up for a number of years, but because of life happening, because of the necessity of what you have out there, inflation and whatnot, you run out of money. That's not a good place to be because now you have to go back to work. So a lot of the things that we hear about, they're true, but some things are not. And Social Security is not a complete retirement plan, and you have to take ownership of your plan. I know here in Illinois, and I know also in New York, there's pension plans that are out there. Some pensions are funded very well through the state, through the government. Some are not. So if you're counting on that as your only source of retirement, I strongly urge you to take a step back and look at some other options to help supplement that. I talk to clients about planning for the future. I tell them, you know what, we're gonna act like Social Security is not there. And if it does come into play, that's your bonus. That's your monthly bonus you're gonna get. Let's plan like it's not even part of your picture because there's no guarantee or certainty that's gonna be there. We talked about a little bit earlier, 401ks and 403bs are important. For those of you who don't know what a 403b is, it's designed specifically for a nonprofit organization, public schools, churches, hospitals, different code of the IRS tax codes, but they operate almost identically to a 401k. But they separate it because those are tax exempt organizations versus 401ks that are for for-profit organizations. But they're great ways, they're payroll deducted. Might be preaching to the choir here, but these are plans that most companies will offer and they make it really easy to save. The advantage is that it's right out of your paycheck, but also it's a tax saving too. You have the ability to put this money aside on a pre-tax basis. meaning that if you make $50,000 a year and you set aside $5,000 over the course of the year, the IRS can only tax you on the difference of that 45,000. So that means less taxes and more money in your pocket. Now, in turn, when you go to retire and pull that money out, yes, you do have to pay taxes. But all that untaxed money has been growing for 10, 20, 30 years, getting that interest and accumulating. So it gives you a little bit more opportunity to put money aside on an ongoing basis with having some tax advantages as well too. And many of you who may be in good situations where you go to tax time and they tell you, hey, you got to write a bill, that's a problem. But 401ks allow you the ability to do that. And even so much now, if you're over the age of 50, you have the ability to save up to $27,000 a year into a 401k. That's a big number. So from a tax planning standpoint, that definitely helps you out. There is a Roth available in most plans or some plans. It doesn't have a current tax situation assistance for you, but it does provide a post-tax situation, meaning that money that goes into the Roth 401k or 403b, it's been money that's already been taxed and run through the whole payroll system. Those dollars, in turn, when you go to retire, come out, including all the interest, tax-free, 100% tax-free. And that's huge. So I get the question a lot, well, which one do I do? Do I do the pre-tax? Do I do the post-tax? And I say, yes, do both, split it up. Because we don't know what the tax situation is going to look like 10 years from now, 5 years from now, let alone 20. So we want to be in a position where it's the time to retire. We look at our savings and what we've done and say, hey, well, the tax rates have gone up significantly. I'm going to start taking my post-tax, my Roth money first, because I can get that tax-free. I'm going to live off of that. And quite honestly, I have clients right now doing that. They're living off that post-tax money because the thing about the 401k, you have to take out a certain amount of money once you reach the age of 72. It's called a minimum distribution, required minimum distribution. So the goal is that, hey, let me live off this tax-free money until I'm required to take it out, then I'll take it. So that's kind of a strategy we want to take a look at. But really from year to year, you want to assess that, because if you have a tax bill every year, you want to lean more towards that pre-tax, just because you don't want to have to pay additional taxes every year. But it could shift as time goes on for you. Some 401ks do provide, provide some kind of matching as well. So that's another incentive to get in there. If you're not participating with the 401k and your company offers a match, you're really just giving money away. You're really not taking full advantage of that. One of the reasons I hear people say that they don't do it, even when there's a match involved. Well, I'm not going to be there for long. I'm not going to, I don't plan on working there for a long period of time. I'll get another one at my next job. That's another procrastination. That's not what we want to talk about. We want to talk about, listen, if they're saying they're going to give you money into your account because you're actually saving to your account, take full advantage. And the best part about it is you can take that money with you. So if you go to a new job in 2 years, pick up your 401k, roll it over to something different, but it's yours. So you're not losing anything by contributing. You're losing money by not contributing, because they put a plan together and they set aside a budget to put funds into your account and encourage you to save. So I'd have a very deep conversation with somebody if they told me they have a match and they're not participating. We talked a little bit about the Roth, and the Roth exists in a couple different ways. Most people have heard of the Roth in the IRA format. The Roth IRA is a plan that you can contribute to on your own, outside your employer, whoever you're working for, and you do it on your own. The only issue you're going to run into with a Roth IRA is that it's designed for a certain tax bracket. So once you exceed a certain income level, the IRS will say you are no longer eligible to participate with a Roth IRA. A Roth 401k through your employer, there's no income limitation. You could be the CEO and you can still contribute to the Roth IRA. A Roth 401k, you would not be able to contribute to a Roth IRA. But the strategy again is, if there is a matching component, take full advantage of the match. And if they don't have a Roth through your job, get a Roth outside of that, so you're making full, maximum capacity for what you can save for yourself. It's a great thing. I mean, it's one of those things where you have a lot of flexibility. A lot of times it's not well broadcasted out there, and our job is to get it out there so you know what the options are as you go forward with everything. With it being Black History Month, we definitely want to jump into this Black empowerment. We've been doing a lot of seminars across the country about this. And this is a scary thing. First time I read that, I had to take a double glance. When it says that the typical white family is nearly 10 times greater in wealth than a Black family. Think about your closest 9 friends that may be Black African American. It would take all of you, based on this stat, to equal one typical net worth of one white family. That's mind blowing. In my mind, obviously there's all different reasons we could think about why that exists. They had a 400-year head start. There's a variety of things. But if we see something like this, we have to go back to ourselves, not to our families, and look at what's been going on just in our short lives. Whatever's been going on with our families, we take a look at how are our financial situations different than theirs, and how they treat their money conversation. Because this gap it's big, and we want to make sure we can shorten that gap as quick as possible. And there's some good stats up here and looking at that, and it's good because if we have business owners on the line here, the net worth declines most of these economic downturns, and mainly because of the fact, it goes back into the basics. We don't have the foundational means to be able to sustain these downturns. There was a 44% decline in the Black community compared to 26% during 2007, 2013. That's a big difference there. Even more so, we look at business owners. There was a 40% of Black business owners were being out of work in April of 2020. That's right at the onset of COVID. That's literally 1 month after COVID started, whereas 17% of white business owners were out of work. There's no mystery behind this. We know what the issues are, but now it's all about how to make up that difference and make sure we're not behind. Talk about student loan debt. We have more average of $25,000 more student loan debt than our counterparts. We have less home ownership. All the things, and those are the things that make the difference between where we are now versus where we can be. And the biggest one here. Only 23% of our communities end up with more wealth than our parents. So take a look at the other way. That means 77% of the Black community has less wealth than their parents. That's unreal, because the overall goal is for us to improve each generation, one generation at a time. Be better than, make a better life for your family and friends. And when I see the statistics, it's mind-blowing. So a lot of the things we talked about earlier, we have to really focus on those. Those are the things that make the difference between where we are versus where we can go. We talked about the market, timing the market up and down. There's a lot of things that we need to consider doing, and that's that systematic savings we were talking about. When we look at timing the market, we'll say, hey, well, I'll get out of the market when it's down. I'll jump back into it right before it gets back up, and I'll be okay. The problem is there's only so much time between when that happens, unless you're sitting in front of a computer and watching it every single day. And when you miss those top performing days, it's definitely going to make a huge impact on your return. Let's take a look. Let's just say you had $100,000 over the last 20 years in the S&P 500. For those not aware, the S&P 500 represents the 500 largest companies in the world. So if you had 100,000 over the last 20 years, you look at, if you stayed invested over those 20 years, never pulled a dime out, made any changes over that 20-year period, your $100,000 is nearly $300,000. Now, let's just say, you got out of the market and you missed just 5 days. 5 days because you were a little nervous about what was happening, COVID was happening, the wars were happening, whatever it may be. Those 5 days missed, you have $100,000 lighter in comparison to someone who stayed in the market. Now, let's say we missed 15 days. Your 100,000 is only 117,000 over 20 years. And if you missed the top 25 days in the market, you actually lost money. So this is a great picture of why we want to ride these waves out. There's a difference. If you miss just 15 days in the market, it's a difference about almost $200,000 that you would have made. But your fear, your nervousness, or just maybe just gut reactions put you in a place like that. So I encourage everyone, whoever is in the market, these are times right now, like the Facebook was down huge today. There's been a lot of big things happening. Hold on. Unless you need this money within the next year, just hold on, because there's going to be opportunities for you to make this up. And in many situations, a lot more than where we would have been. But this is one of my favorite slides, because these 1999 and 2018, that encompasses a lot of things that we've seen. I mean, that was 9/11 built into there. That was a housing crisis. I mean, there's a lot that happened. The Obama presidency. I mean, all those things, a lot happened over that time. But if you held on, you're in a much better place than you were than someone else who did not hold on. Persistence, talking about just the investments and how much time you have, just the time value of money. The longer you stay in it, obviously, the more you make. These items on the left side for percentages represent, the rate of return. So obviously, the more return that you're making, the longer you keep it in there, the larger sum you're going to end up having over time. And this is just looking at just $84 a month. $84,000 a month over 20 years, $33,000. May not seem like a lot, but $84 a month is not a lot either. We spend that on a good weekend out, at dinner, or whatever the case may be. So keep in mind that the systematic, ongoing investments, these are going to want to make the difference for you, and you have to hold on during those times too. Oops, let me go here. Sorry. So as we wrap up here, we want to assess your current picture. We talked about making sure that you know where you are, because if you know where you are, you can have a better idea of where you want to go. That's the hard work. Hard work, but it must be done. Without that, it's hard to build going forward. We want to have that foundation, building on that risk management we talked about, their cash reserves, making sure that we are solid in case of any situation, emergency, death, disability, anything out there. You want to make sure you're positioned properly to do that. And if you have that, you're setting yourself up for success. Debt, stop charging. Just stop charging. Once you stop charging, you're going to feel so much freedom, because now you can actually physically work on knocking that debt down. And my favorite of them all, pay yourself first. Like I said, you work hard every single day. There's no reason why you cannot put some money aside for yourself for that rainy day, for the emergency, or maybe treat yourself. But in any point in time, you need to make sure you're working for yourself and not working for all these different companies. I'll say to myself, Amazon. I don't work for Amazon, but I think Amazon a lot of money because I'm always shopping on there. But it's because I'm putting money aside outside of that. And lastly, I would say, working with a professional and reviewing your strategies. Those are important. A lot of people can do it themselves. And I tell people all the time, if you have the time, the ability, and are able to do it with your day job, knock yourself out. Some of the best people I've met have been able to do it for themselves and by themselves, and it's a great thing. But if you don't have the time, you don't have the research ability or the knowledge to do it, or just don't want to do it, work with somebody. That's what we're here for. We want to make sure that you have the information to make great decisions for yourself. And as we're doing that, our job is to check in and say, hey, what's going on, what's changed, and how do we move forward to adjust if we need to make an adjustment. Quick plug, Equitable, that's my background company here, Equitable. We've been in business over 160 years. And like I mentioned, there's a big impact that we're making right now, trying to make sure that our name is out there and making sure that we are definitely providing, some of the stability for our communities. It says equity is in our name, and that's what we want to do, and there's been a lot of time, money, and energy dedicated to really reestablishing where we are. Because there was a time in which Equitable was a very strong organization on the diversity side. Before diversity was a word, it was already there. So we are making a strong effort to bring that back. And a part of this presentation today was geared based on that. And we're here. And in New York specifically, that's where headquarters is in the US. So right there on the Avenue of Americas. So when you're ready, we'll be here. Anka, my counterpart, she's not here today, but she's definitely very active in the area. I work with her a lot in different spaces. Like I mentioned, she's been around for a long time. I remember the first time I met her was actually in New York. We were having our African American Summit every year. I think it was her first year. And she showed us around, and she's been really great in this business. She's very knowledgeable. She's another certified financial planner as well. And we work well and partner with each other because we have different strengths, in different areas. But have questions, you need assistance, my information is here. I definitely can get Anka's information as well, but we're here to help and we work together. It's not a competition. So if you work with her, that's great. Work with me, whatever the case may be. But we definitely want to make sure we provide everything that you need to put yourself in a better financial position than you were yesterday. And with that, I think we're all done. So I appreciate your time and thank you so much for having me on today.
No, thank you. We want to thank you for taking the time. I don't want to try to give you a little chance to maybe get some water to quench your thirst a little bit, because I'm sure you've been talking nonstop for a little over an hour now and giving a lot of great information, but I definitely want to make sure that everyone is able to benefit from the information that you provided. So again, thank you for being able to take some time out today to give us a lot of really good nuggets of information. So additionally, what I would like to do now is address some of the questions that we've actually been given, that we've seen in the chat area and on Facebook. Before we actually do get into all of that, I know you put up your information as well, but are there any other websites or places that people can go to find those certified financial planners? And like, is there like a general, like a clearinghouse or something where they can go to get this information, where they can look somebody up to be able to get that advice that they really need?
Absolutely. Yeah, the Certified Financial Planning Board, their website is cfp.net. From there, you can do a search of any financial plan. You type in your zip code and they can do a search within the area. I tell clients, and that's one way of going about it. I've had clients call me from there. They did the research to do it. But I would say, I obviously start with someone you know and ask for a recommendation. Ask for a referral to a place like that, to a person who may have some experience and you have some history behind them. But yeah, the cfp.net will be the primary resource to find any certified financial planners that are still active and helping people out.
Excellent, excellent. One question that I know that did come up, and I think it did get answered a little bit, but I want to bring it up anyway, is this question coming from Kenya Edwards, who asks, is it true that there are no taxes on money that's withdrawn after 59 and a half years of age? And what are the rules on that?
So if it's money that's coming from a pre-tax 401k or a traditional IRA, unfortunately, it is taxed. Every dollar that goes into those plans is going in with zero taxes. So when it comes out, the IRS they're ready to collect, and they want to make sure that every dollar that comes out does pass through the tax code. The way it is taxed, it's all considered income for that year. So if you're pulling it out in addition to other income that you have, it will go on top of that. So if you're in a situation where the amount you take out puts you above a certain tax level, you could potentially jump into the next tax bracket. So if that's the situation you're striving to get away from, you have to be very careful when you start taking that money out.
Now, you provided us a lot of really good information, and I'm sure there are some people who are in a particular position to be able to take advantage of a lot of that. But of course, because of the pandemic, there are going to be a lot of people who may not be in such a position, right? We know that there are a lot of people who are hurting financially because of the pandemic or for other reasons. So what can people do who may want to take advantage of a lot of the resources and strategies you provided, but may not have the quote unquote discretionary income to do so? Because life happens. But what are some of the small things that they can do to actually get started?
I would say, it's not about how much you have, it's how you use it. So I would say when you have a situation where you might be in an uncomfortable place you haven't been before, and you don't have the resources to do the strategies you want to implement. Again, the basics are what we always focus on. Always happy to sit down and talk to somebody about just putting together the plan, putting together your budget, putting together, where your debts are, organizing that. That's going to be what will be most impactful when first getting started. And as you find, where you are and navigate to where you want to go, then at some point in time, maybe you can implement some of the saving strategies. But the key is, you really have to see where you are. And I think far too often we jump ahead of where we are because we're excited to be at the next level. And we look over the trees and don't see what's at our feet. So we definitely would say, find out where you are, get a good inventory of what's out there for you. If it's debt, if it's whatever it may be, bankruptcy, whatever it may be, and figure out how to alleviate that as quick as possible. But yeah, part of the strategy would be starting right there.
There were a couple of slides that you presented that were extremely eye-opening, and one of them was having to do with the white families have 10 times the income that Black families do, and that in the Black community, only 23% will actually have more income than or be better off than their parents were. What can we do to start to turn those trends around? So how soon should we be talking about these financial issues with our children?
Great question. I have two children. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. And we have those conversations now. They ask what I do and I tell them. And talk about the importance of, saving a dollar, paying yourself first. My 9-year-old to this day, she got money from the tooth fairy. She said, well, I'm gonna put $1 of it away. I'm gonna put it somewhere. So the earlier you start, the better. And you want to have those conversations. It's important, from a child standpoint to get that. And you don't want to make it too complicated, but I remember growing up and getting money for the holidays and getting money for your birthdays and whatnot. And that was instilled in me very early on. And if you don't do it then, it makes it that much harder, because talking to a 10-year-old or 8-year-old is easier than talking to a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, try to get them to start saving. It can still happen, but the earlier you start, the better, for sure.
Great. Another question that came in, and it happens to be from another fraternity brother of ours, Tim Pratt. He asked, what are some of the costs that are associated with getting a financial planner, and will the performance match the cost of the advice?
Great question. There's several different ways to work with financial planners. One way is using strictly a fee-based financial planner. And what that is, the cost is based on the complexity of the situation, and you pay them a flat fee to give advice, give recommendations to go different directions, put strategies together. They're not managing investments. They're not going to be, overseeing the investments. They're just going to give you strategies and be sort of your personal trainer. I'm going to push you to do certain things that you may not have been able to do, but be there on a regular basis. Other financial planners may work in different capacities where they're going to receive any kind of compensation based on the assets that they manage. And typically, depending on what it is, it could be as low as 0.5% of the total assets. It could be up to, I've seen some high ones, 1.5%, 2%. So it depends on the situation, how much they're managing. But it's never tied to performance. And that's one thing I always tell clients, is that we're not paying for the performance. You're not paying an investor to pay for the performance. You're paying for the advice. You're paying for the advice to guide in the right direction. If we had the crystal ball and get guaranteed results, we probably wouldn't be in business. We probably do our own thing, So you're paying for the advice to give certain things, just like with a doctor. You go to a doctor's office, you pay the visit. They say, "Oh, this is wrong with you. We'll give you some medicine. If it doesn't work, come back. We'll try it again." It's a practice, and this is a financial planning practice too. We're not perfect. We'll make some mistakes. But those mistakes have some strategy behind them. But there's a variety of ways of going about it. But there's fee-based, where you just pay the advisor to be your coach, to be your liaison to the markets. Or you have one that's a full bread, and you're in there and you're making changes to the investments and recommending different products and services.
So I'm going to pick your brain for a moment. This question is actually coming from a Rogelio Garnes, and please forgive me if I mispronounce your name, sir. But Rogelio asks, in regards to eliminating debt, given the current climate that we happen to be in, do you think that it would be that paying off student loan debt aggressively would be the best way to go, or would an income-driven plan over a period of time be a better way to address it?
That's a good question. Some of the great things that have come out of COVID, there's there's been these student loan forgiveness plans where, well, not forgive, I'm sorry, they're kind of a hiatus. They stopped required payments to student loans and they dropped the interest to zero. If you were already paying a student loan prior to all this happening, and you continue your payment, you are very well ahead of where you would have been because there's no interest accruing. So it's tough because I know they just extended it recently, but in a situation where it's 0% and you want to knock some debt off, and if that's the goal, absolutely take advantage of that. Now, given the conditions where we are with COVID and everything happening, an income-driven one is good because if your income dropped and you were on a income-driven repayment plan, you'll see your payments drop as well. And they're very, very considerate of what's going on to be able to make some adjustments and work with you with that. But I would say it's kind of a case-by-case situation. I mean, I've always liked the income-driven ones because of the fact that they're not going to put you in a position that you can't really take care of the debt. And then hopefully as time goes on, as your income is growing and going along that situation, you can put more towards it to pay it down. That's tough though. I mean, I would say, they're both good situations. It really just depends on where you are. But income-driven has always been I've been a fan favorite of an income-driven.
Okay. And this question is coming from a Cyrus King. I think he or she may have joined in a little later and missed this particular part of your presentation, but what do you feel about investing in Bitcoin or Forex? I know you had mentioned that, but like I said, a couple of our viewers may have come in right after that portion of your presentation. So can you just go back to that piece again?
Absolutely. It goes back to diversification. Yeah, I do believe in diversification. Crypto is a very specific type of currency. It's unregulated. It's not bad by any means, but with Bitcoin investing, it goes back to the foundational things we're talking about. If you're not in a position where you don't have the savings for emergency, you don't have the proper insurances or retirement plans established, I'd be really reluctant to suggest doing Bitcoin, because it's such a specialty and such a volatile type of investment. It can be really, really good for you, but you put yourself in a pretty precarious situation if all you have is Bitcoin and you need some other funds. If you're going to invest in Bitcoin and you're going to want to venture into that path, you be very mindful of the risk that goes with that. If you're willing to lose whatever you put into Bitcoin, that's the perfect amount for you. If it's not a number you would be happy seeing go away, then I'd say I drop the number down a little bit, or maybe look at some other alternatives.
Okay. What advice would you give to a young person? I know you had talked about the young people before, people who maybe have been single, living at home with their parents, and now they're kind of venturing off on their own. So what advice would you give to a young person who's trying to build credit?
Build credit. Oh, credit. So definitely you want to, if you're trying to build credit, you're young, you don't want to bite off more than you can chew. Credit is actually one of the greatest things you can have. Bad credit is also one of the worst things you can have. So you want to establish your credit. So get a credit card, but be mindful of how you're using it. Buy a car, be mindful, of your payments and paying on time, because those are the things that allow you to create good wealth down the road here. Because if you can establish a good credit record and build that up, that gives you leverage to be able to do more things down the road. The key is just being responsible and not, if you only make $30,000 a year, there's no need to get a $30,000 credit limit card. Get you something small, get you a couple $1,000 credit card limit, and that'll allow you to build up the consistency, build up the credit score, and also teach you a little bit more responsibility of how it works. Credit is your friend until it goes the opposite way. It goes bad for you.
No, I'm quite sure it is. I'm quite sure it is. A lot of people get in. I think there was a study that the one thing that gets people into trouble in college the most is credit. They get into debt because of the use of or misuse of credit cards. And it happens, there are predatory practices where all these companies give out these free credit cards to the students just to sign their name without any kind of income check or anything like that. And then before you know it, you're spending your cards to get books, to take that trip to Cancun or whatever. And now you have thousands of dollars in debt that you don't have a job yet to pay it back.
Exactly. Yep. I can attest to that. Yeah, I remember that in college campus freshman year, they're handing out you get a T-shirt if you just sign up for a credit card. Or you get a get a gift card. You sign up for a credit card. So it's fair. It's definitely predatory in those situations.
So let me ask you this as well, because we know that a lot of people are trying to build their own wealth and leave a legacy for their children now, especially after listening to presentations like yours. And in doing so, they're turning to maybe purchasing a franchise or going into real estate. What can you tell us about these particular paths to wealth building?
It has its place. I mean, having franchises, having real estate, I mean, those are great avenues to really build things up. And again, it's like anything else, you want to diversify. You know, if you think about the landlords over the last 2 years, they weren't protected. You know, I mean, there's situations where, you know, if you own a lot of properties and you have renters, you know, the renters could have been in situations they didn't have to pay. So who's paying the mortgage? So it's a tough place to be in. And from a franchise standpoint too, if it's restaurants, you know, the restaurant industry changed dramatically 2 years ago. So those are, again, different risk levels that go along with that. But it's important that, you know, you understand the risk. And again, having the foundation. If you put everything you have into this franchise, you need to be very careful, because, you know, we've seen what could happen if they do not perform the way they're supposed to perform. And now you're in a situation where you have to kind of hit the reset button and start over. The thing about legacy planning, which is important, and I didn't mention it, but I'm glad you bring it up now with, you know, building that legacy and having businesses in real estate. I love the ideas behind them. They're great. I mean, I know people do really well with those. The difference between our communities and our counterparts, and I've noticed it in this work with clients. I work with all nationalities, all backgrounds, and now there's a very strong emphasis on life insurance on other communities. I mean, most of that wealth that we're seeing, it's not because they have, you know, they have money saved under their mattress or a couple $1,000s here and there throughout the house. No, they're getting sizable amounts of money being transitioned from generation to generation. I remember when I first started 18 years ago, I worked up in the North Shore of Chicago, and, you know, the community is very different than, you know, typical downtown areas. And, you know, and these guys, that was their mentee learning about the business, and I'm seeing things like $15 million life insurance policies, $10 million life insurance policies. And I'm asking, who's buying these policies? And they would just show me somebody, he's, you know, average Joe, makes $75,000 a year. But part of their goal is that, you know, they receive money like that from their grandparents, and they're going to provide to their kids and their grandparents as well. But when we have the conversation in our community, it's not the same. And it sounds morbid, but that's the wealth building process, because if you have those things in play, you have a little head start ahead of those who don't. So definitely have always encouraged and let clients know this is important. You know, it's not about, you know, making them set for life and making them not having to work. No, you can structure it any way you want. But if you don't even have the mindset of thinking like that, that's where we fall short many times.
And I'll make this our last question, but if you work with a client, do you personally make suggestions on investment vehicles such as stocks or things to invest in, to pick in, or do you pick fund managers who are actually going to do that? And if so, if in the case of fund managers, will the client be double charged for the exposure to those managers?
Great question. Yeah, I mean, I do a combination of both. And to answer your question, there's no double charge. There's no double charge in that situation. So an example of something like that would be someone with an IRA, or just call it, say an IRA. You know, we could say, hey, here are a selection of investments that are here for you. You know, we've handpicked them based on research from Morningstar and LPL, all the different research firms. And we've gone within our local team here and put these together for you. Or we can go through a Morningstar who does the research as well, and they create their own portfolios, and they do their own thing, and they manage it actively too. And typically when you see that, the cost will be pretty similar when you're looking at that. So there's definitely not a double charge in that situation, unless the advisor is getting a fee above and beyond what the management expenses are. But that goes with, I always tell clients up front, ask the question of, what am I paying? What am I paying for? And what's the benefit behind it? And as long as you have that transparency up front, as a certified financial planner, we have to provide that transparency, so that's why I encourage working with someone with that background, because we're held to a higher level of standard, especially with the Department of Labor making many changes over the last several years. But yeah, you have options. I present options to clients and say, this is the advantage of this one, this is the advantage of the other one. So that's great question. Good one to finish up on.
So yes, thank you, Brother Johnson, for taking your time out today to spend some time with us and give us some really great information. So we want to really thank Brother Robert Johnson, Certified Financial Planner, for coming with us today and providing a lot of really great information on just financial strategies and wealth building that you all can utilize immediately starting tomorrow. So again, thank you for coming, and thank all of you all for watching. But before we do close out, I want to turn things back over to our Vice Polemarch, Brother Lee Smith. Lee?
Yes. Thank you again, Brother Johnson, for joining us this evening. And thank you to Brother Kevin Boston Hill. Just wanted to remind you again, all month long, every Thursday evening from 7 to 8:30 p.m., we will be hosting these informationals that will be coming out. So next week, we have Navigating COVID-19, the variants and the vaccine. On the 17th, we have a voters town hall with Brooklyn Councilman Shio Sang. And on the 24th, we have mental health experts here to talk about your mental health and COVID. So thank you again. I'm Lee Smith, your Vice Polemarch of Brooklyn Long Island alumni. And on behalf of Roland Williams, the Polemarch of Brooklyn Long Island alumni, we wish you a good evening. Thank you again for joining.